Thanks again, Jeanne. Really pleased that you're able to join us today.
It's
So,
my complete pleasure to be with you.
so we've got some questions, and we're really excited to hear, get your perspective on some of those views. So the
Sure.
first one is, obviously you've worked with lots and lots of organisations, large and small, commercial and not-for-profit. But what are the common things that all organisations have to get right? What are the basics for a good customer experience?
Well, I talk about competencies, which are really building a way to tell the story of customers, donors, lives. And the very first competency is around honoring the customer as the asset of your business. What's interesting is that, especially as you have different efforts that are led by different parts of your organization, a fund run, a mailing campaign, we measure each one of those independently and consider success or whatever based on the response to the individual campaign, if you will.
Uh-huh.
But what we really need to do is look at the growth or loss of the donor base that's contributing to grow the charity. Without that, we're kind of getting a false positive, but we're also not looking at the totality of our efforts. So as a result of what we did in this last month, how many new donors did we bring in, volume and value, but how many did we lose, or how many downgraded, or how many lapsed, in terms of the totality of the donors or the contributors to our cause. Without doing that, we don't really start with, are we growing as a result of the work? We're looking at each area individually or each project or campaign individually, but we really need to create a simple metric, which is attached to growth.
Uh-huh. So one of the basics is just getting those core metrics in place, measuring the right things. So if we're going to maximise the customers that grow the customer base and improve the experiences that we have, what are the ways in which we should be working together to do that? What are the basics of a good experience for a customer?
Well, the other thing that we've been doing a lot is what I call a goal map. It's not a journey map, it's a goal map, based on your customers, what they're trying to achieve as they interact with you. So, one of the first things is figure out where I want to contribute in the world. A lot of people, when you talk to them and you ask them about their journey map, it's what you want to get from a customer. Prospect, sell, conquest, contract, resell, upsell. That's not the customer's journey, and that's not the customer's goal. So talk to your customers, your donors, your contributors, and ask them what's important to them as they're considering you, as they interact with you. And then that should drive how you operationalize the work of the business. I talk about this a lot. Build a goal map. What are the goals? And then write the quotes you want your customers to say about their experience. Because if you begin with that end in mind, that means this is what we have to operationalize to. I want to give you an example. This isn't in the not-for-profit world or the charity world, but it illustrates it really well. We were doing work with a global organization, Bombardier Aerospace. They make planes. And the part of the business we were working with was the part that made private planes for high wealth individuals. So as we were building their map, they started to say, well, let's talk about the parts and service experience, which is the other no-no. Don't make your different stages be about an individual silo, because the customer, when they interact with you, it's about many parts of your organization. And I nudged them a little and I said, do you really want to talk about the parts and service experiences? Your customers think about it that way. And they thought, and I said, what they really care about is the keep me flying experience. The keep me flying experience is, how many days do I have a well-groomed, taken care of airplane with pilots who are at the ready? And how many days do I have to go down unscheduled to get service or whatever? And then how long does it take to get me back up in the air? When you think about it that way, that now creates a lot of people that have to work together. Pilots, technicians, yes, service and parts, but in congruence with the goal, which is keep me flying. That also fundamentally changes what you measure. operationally. So the first thing we talked about was measuring the outcome, which is growth. But the second big thing is create a goal map and have that drive what you measure operationally, which is what you want your customer to talk about that they achieved. And that's a real fundamental shift.
And if you can achieve that alignment of your organizational goals with your customer goals, then that's obviously the real sweet spot. I think I saw a quote a few years ago, and it was from a chap called Paul Shervish, I think it's from Boston College, and he said, and this is so similar to what you're saying about, but he was related to charities, saying charities should be changing things around, and rather than looking at donors as a means of helping a charity support its mission, it should be completely the other way around. A charity should exist in order to help a donor achieve their personal mission. So it is all about helping them achieve.
Yeah, to create altruism in my life, right? What is my goal when I donate? You know, I'm at a point in my life where fortunately we're able to give. It's about serving others, serving my passion, understanding people in the world who need help, having some kind of knowledge of where my money went. You know, I mean, it's this whole thing, and it's fascinating. I've done, and I've continued to do an enormous amount of, have a partnership with St. Jude Children's Hospitals and Research Center, which is pretty well known around the world. And that was the big shift that we did, was around contributing to the donor's sense of well-being and giving in the world. And when you do that, it really shifts. It's not about what you want to get from the donor, but what you want to give to the donor as they fulfill this thing in their heart, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. So I feel like we've already covered this a little bit, but I'm just going to tease it out. There's sort of the next area, which is around really looking at this the other way around. So if we've talked about some of what the basics are to get those right, what are the pitfalls and common mistakes? So, you know, what would be so in your huge amount of experience, what would be the kind of the top three things that you often see and you're going, oh no, you know, what are the three, I don't know, the top most common pitfalls that you come across?
Sure. You know, I think it's turning it into a program versus the culture of the business, not having leaders in the effort. So one of the things that we do is you have to really unite your leadership team around one version of the truth of what your starting point is. Because if you don't all agree on how well you're doing with donors or your contributors today, you're going to continuously do nothing but debate what should be done and what success is. So one of the things that we do is we'll bring donors in and we'll build a draft goal map, and then we'll ask them to rate how well we're doing, not from our point of view, but from their point of view, how well we're working together to deliver reliability and helping them achieve their goal. And it's pretty simple. It's, you know, green, 100% reliable, yellow, somewhere in the middle, and red, it's just tough. And if you start there, now we've got everybody recognizing where we can rise from.
Okay, so very, very quickly then, if the, well, not very quickly, but if that kind of one, if having that kind of clear point of leadership around knowing your purpose in some respects and being clear about that, so it's very easy to say, but that's actually can be quite difficult to take the right steps towards getting leadership owning what is a great customer experience.
That's the work. Well, right, and it's so much of this culture change is around repetition and commonality of language. So one of the big things we've done in a lot of the charities that we work with is we actually change the report out at the CEO level from silo report out to customer goal report out, where multiple leaders have to come together and talk about their shared metric, the outcome, play customer calls, etc., versus, oh, fun run people, report on your fun run, or data people, report on where we are in cleaning the data. So what, right? We get very focused on data or AI or whatever, but if we don't connect it back in a continuous way, then we're segmenting the work of the business and not looking at it from a growth standpoint.
Okay, so again, then a pitfall or common mistake would be, I guess, getting stuck in those silos
Yeah,
and I guess you're saying that repetition and language and commonality is it's not necessarily a shortcut, but it's definitely going to lubricate the process in terms of
it's a
bringing
boost.
out that.
Yeah. It accelerates the work, and it over time it starts to become the language of leaders, right?
Excellent.
And your people will see that as the language of leaders, and they'll adopt it as their own language, and you'll find the conversations starting to be about the recognize where my money went experience, or see the life of that's been improved experience, or the determine where I should give next experience, or the whatever the goal is. You'll start galvanizing people to work together differently.
Okay, brilliant. So if we've got this nirvana of the leaders all kind of focused on that single clear customer supported goal, and then we know then that obviously employee engagement and getting the whole organization behind that is important. And again, the language and the repetition is going to be really important in there.
Sure.
And in the voluntary sector, so the charity sector, it's often under-resourced, especially today, after with many organisations having to make staff redundant. What tips would you give to an organisation that wants to help all employees and volunteers to give great customer experiences when resources are quite strained?
Sure. And if I could clarify, when I talk about goal map, I'm not talking about one individual goal. I'm talking about the stages of the different goals the customers have that they want to achieve as they're working with you.
Yes.
So instead of building a journey map, you build a goal map. So you've got distinct things that you can operationalize around. So if you've built that, then bring your employees in and say, by goal, how can you contribute to this? What's getting in your way of delivering? And so what's wonderful about that is now we intersect culture and operation, because often they're looked at as separate things. And get rid of the things that are getting in your people's way of making the call, right? Are you doing anything that's accidentally clipping their wings, or reducing their ability to feel like they're contributing?
So how do you help organisations create customer or supporter goal maps? How do you go about doing that?
We first of all look at their original journey map, because a lot of people have done it now, and then we just prod to understand, do you mean this? And we go through many sessions of building a draft, but then we have to take it to the customer. And or you could start with the customer first. We often do that. The reason we sometimes start with employees is from an acculturation standpoint. We'll talk about what they thought the goal map was, then we'll talk to customers, and then we'll go back and say, look at what we've learned, everybody. And it's fascinating, because we have to sometimes realize how kind of internal our focus is. So when we do that round robin approach, it's helpful, but you have to involve your customers in listening. One of the things that a lot of times people do is they validate. Hey, we're thinking of this. What do you think? Mm-hmm. That's not what this is. It's tell us about the first thing that's important to you. What are you trying? And then listening to them, and you can organize a structured conversation where you ask questions and then tickle out of that the goal map, right? A lot of times what we've seen is surveys also are changing and have to change from validating to understanding, doing feedback that's less about a survey and more about listening in a fearless way. To one of my clients, for example, they were wonderful, but it was very hard to give a credit card to do a donation. So while you've got this connection of wanting to give, you're so annoyed. And so the buzz that you get from giving kind of goes away because of the operational glitch that's challenging in the giving process.
Wow. So when you were talking about journey maps, and that lots of organizations kind of already have journey maps, it got me thinking about lots of organizations already have their customers segmented as well. So, and you might have different journeys for different segments. So I was thinking, does the goal map So what comes first? Is it the segmentation or the goal map? Do you create segments out of goal maps, or do you create goal maps out of segments?
Well, you know, the purpose of segmenting, for example, your donors or your customers, is to understand,
Yes.
and to customize some responses. But the goals are probably the same. You just would perhaps, once you know who the customer is, create perhaps a more customized response during the goal, or you use the segmentation as a me mechanism,
Yeah.
versus that. This is where I think we've kind of created a lot of complexity. We're going to create a journey by persona, or we're going to create a goal by segmentation. We've created so much complexity around this, that we've made it feel insurmountable sometimes. I like to keep it pretty simple.
Okay. Simple's good. You like simple.
Yeah, we've overcomplicated it, quite honestly. And I think some of it has been around, you know, we're excited about the work, but we have to pull back and realize the only purpose for doing this work is to change the behavior of our leaders and our organization. If we do all this journey mapping and it sits in binders on a shelf, or the marketing department thinks it's cool, but it doesn't become adapted to the language of leaders, to how we hold ourselves accountable, and to the operations of the business, then we just had a great day with Post-it notes, right?
Or maybe not so great.
Well, or a day with Post-it notes, right?
Yes.
And a lot of video mapping. So yeah, what's the point if it's not taken forward? And the best way to take it forward is to keep it simple and inspirational, and then allow it to start to become, you know, embedded. And so many people leapfrog past the names of the stages or the goals and immediately inventory the 100 touch points. Now your eyes are rolling into the back of your head, versus spend the time to build the goals, change leaders' language, and watch what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Definitely. So, this is developing nicely. So my next area of sort of kind of chat, if you like, is around measures. So I'm sure everybody who's watching today will know about loyalty. That we're really part of what we do is measuring stuff, because at our hearts we believe actually it's very difficult to shift something or know you've shifted it or improved it if you're not measuring it. And all organisations measure sales and income, because that's dead easy to measure. But what else do you see sort of the best customer-centric organisations measuring? What else do they measure?
Well, again, the growth or loss of the customer base for me is number one. That's, at the end of the day, the proof in the pudding that you did something right? So, but you have to, that's hard work, because you have to get a one company version of what is new, what is lost, what is lapsed, and take the ownership of that. This isn't a sales number, right? A lot of times we look at that as a sales number. So it's a shift in attitude, not a dashboard. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's important is aggregating what I call feedback or listening. Yep. By goal. So one of the big things that happens is social media presents and people scurry off, and our complaint department presents and people scurry off, but we haven't organized and agreed upon the categorization of it. And if we don't, it's all, again, that splintering that occurs. So one of the things, what we know leaders need are tonnage, or enough volume of customers, donors, contributors saying the same thing, and convergence of multiple sources pointing at the same thing, right? To take it seriously. So this is, again, a part of work, our work often, which is getting people to agree to categorize in a common way so it can roll up. And then change your storytelling. And again, it takes every person who owns that data for agreeing to come together and do the story in the goal of figuring out where I want to contribute in the world, or whatever it is. Here's our social, here's our complaint information, here's our NPS verbatims, here's the spaghetti bowl of the process steps, and then here's our score. But that means bringing a lot of parts of the organization together to agree, and shifting the storytelling from starting with the score to starting with the life, So you can imagine the life, play customer calls, and
Uh-huh.
ending with the score, but the score isn't the most important thing. The data is that helps people recognize the life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you have, so it's a mix of sort of success against customer goals, the map to goals that leads to customer growth. And one of the ways in which you can understand whether you're succeeding in terms of delivering those goals is through feedback and sort of gathering, sort of listening and feedback. So,
Right.
so can you? I'll put you on the spot here. Can you give an example of a good customer goal that's mapped, and succeeding in that goal will lead to customer growth? And then how would you know whether or not you're succeeding with that goal or not, if that makes sense?
Well, okay, sure. So for a lot of B2B clients, onboarding is a big part of the goal. Okay.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of times people look at onboarding as ticking the boxes of the stuff we did to the customer. We
Uh-huh.
backed the truck up, we dumped all this stuff on them. But what you really need to be looking at are, again, and the other thing is behavioral listening. What did the customer do?
Uh-huh.
Look at their behavior patterns. So the goal isn't, did we tick the boxes from our end of onboarding? It's more about helping them with adoption till we see behavioral patterns that X number of people are using it, or X percent have gotten deep into it. And so for us in that arena, success is looking at the feedback, but also looking at the behavior. And when the behavior shows that people are really getting it, or if the behavior shows they're stuck, now we can go back in and make sure that we see there's a value erosion moment, that we go back in and say, we notice 50% of your people haven't even logged in yet.
Uh-huh.
What can we do about that? Because adoption hasn't occurred yet. So think about listening as not only the feedback they give, but the behavior they show inside. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Do you, so you talked about sort of numbers of customers and behaviors and actions on social media. Do you have sort of any pointers on measuring someone's emotional, how people feel about a brand or feel about their relationship with an organization?
Well, there's lots of different mechanisms. I mean, I don't advocate one over another. I think that you have to decide which one is better for you. For me, you know, there's lots of ways of listening and reviewing the information. You know, so I don't believe that an individual survey can tell you about the emotion of a customer. For me, it's the convergence of a lot of different things happening.
Yes.
So, you know, look at that, but you know, there's not just one score you need to know, or one survey that you can say, okay, we tick that box, we're done with customer stuff. And it's an ongoing, the sand is shifting on a regular basis. So the whole point of this is that you're refreshing this information constantly. The other part is proactively understanding from an operational standpoint how you're doing. So this is what I call your revenue erosion early warning system, which is, let's say, back on the Bombardier Aerospace thing. Mm-hmm. They now know before their customers tell them they're disappointed when things are occurring that's going to force a plane to go down for an unscheduled maintenance. So now they know before the onslaught of that's about to happen, so they can prevent that from happening. Yep. So if you're a fundraising organization largely driven by web, and you know your web's about to go down or whatever, or you know 50% of your people didn't get through a transaction, or something's broken, or whatever it is, or what, you know, whatever you're measuring operationally, you should be watching those things with as much rigor as you're looking at selling or whatever, because it's interesting, the mechanics of giving very much impact the reward of giving. Uh-huh. Absolutely. So you should very much be managing the operational metrics that make the mechanics of giving either easy, hard, emotionally rewarding, or frustrating. You don't want your customer to remember you for the effort it took to give, right?
Yeah. It needs to be easy to do.
Totally. And then, like you said, the emotional payoff can happen in your communication, in how you personalize it, in what you do, and how you stay in contact with them. One of the most fun projects we did was we built kind of the goal map for the Smithsonian Institute, great institute people know about around the world, in the United States, in Washington. And it was really around planning a trip, arriving at a building. But the last one was back home again. So what's your version of back home again? How do you keep that juice alive that comes from giving, right? And I think so many people forget about that.
So one of the things you talked about is that the sands are shifting, and things do change, and actually you need to be and people's expectations, customers' expectations change over time. So with the advent of the likes of Amazon and Uber and Airbnb, those kinds of, there's so many, aren't there, that have just changed what people's expectations are. Just thinking about the future, if we can indulge one another for a little bit, what does the future of customer experience hold? So with the direction of that things are heading now, and how will successful customer experience be different in the future?
Well, I don't even call it customer experience anymore. If I could crash everybody's balloon, I call it leadership.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is clearly just about leading. How are you going to grow, and what won't you do to grow? And for me, it's about embedding your humanity. It's about having a clear set of non-negotiables of what you will and will not do. It's really living your purpose and putting your money where your mantra is. If you are congruent, meaning you enable people to act at work like they act at home, and you connect your purpose to how you operate, you will stand out differently in the marketplace. Now, by definition, you're always going to, because you're a charity and your goodness, right? But how you show up in the actions of your business, there's still a way of doing it differently. So I fear, quite honestly, that customer experience is starting to be looked at as a department, when in fact it's a toolkit to inform leadership. And leadership at its core is about choosing how we're going to show up, choosing how our actions define the kind of people that we are.
I think we're probably running short of time, but I think that is an absolutely fantastic sort of summary of what we should be thinking. It's customer experience is a toolkit to inform leadership, and it's about how we turn up, isn't it? It's about how we approach almost everything that we're doing, and keeping that authentic and focused and around those customer goals.
Yeah, and we've accidentally started to become almost internal about customer experience, where it's about customer experience versus the greater good of the business, right? And we have to be careful. We just have to be careful.
That's absolutely fantastic. So I'm sure there's lots of people who might have questions for you, and what we'll do is we'll capture them, and we'll not necessarily insist that you respond to any, but if there's any that we can siphon your way, we'll see if we can respond to some of those at some point in the future.
Okay, sounds perfect.
But thank you so much, Jeanne, for your time today, and really appreciate it, and wish you all the very, very best indeed. Thank you very much indeed.